Is it gamification? Is it just capitalism? Is it algorithmic based perfect pricing, or is it all of the above? And we are just pawns in this late stage capitalist rigmarole. Welcome to Crash, the tech podcast about everything else. Today, that means how airport lounges could be a metaphor for the whole global economy, how fighting robots could be a metaphor for the whole future of AI, and why I stopped saying the tierification of everything for a while, though we're probably going to mention it a lot in this episode. I'm Alex Hudson.
And I am Chris Stokel-Walker. Hola from Barcelona, Alex.
Hello. How is Mobile World Congress? How is everything?
Scary,
how are you?
Big. I'm all right. I'm too warm because it's Barcelona. I'm in the world's smallest hotel room, so the laptop is literally on the wall there, and I am literally sat as far back as I can be in front of the bed. And I have a single bed and then the wall. So it's a very thin but long room, but it's lovely. It's a nice little city centre hotel. And Mobile World Congress, MWC, is bigger than I thought it was. And simultaneously less interesting than I thought it was, but also has some fun little weird quirks to it as well.
You thought it was not going to be interesting. You said you were going and you were sort of being paid to go and you weren't going to find it interesting at all.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say large parts of that are still correct in that I'm not going tomorrow. Today, when this is released, there is one more day. Probably not going to find myself there in the halls. I am a little bit MWC'd out. And truthfully, I've only been there kind of 3/4 of each day and half of today when we're recording, which is Wednesday. So I'm probably between 50 and 60% of the time. But as friend of the podcast, Mike Butcher, who I ran into at a press briefing, said, the efficiency means that I am probably still have completed most of MWC that I need to.
How is Mike Butcher?
He's good. He's good. He asked a very interesting question of a company called Infobip, which is a Croatian tech firm. He was causing a little bit of mischief with them, asking
we should probably say who Mike Butcher is first before you say how he is. Who is Mike Butcher?
So Mike Butcher is a European tech journalism institution. He'd probably hate me for saying that because institution implies that he's old, but he possesses an MBE. He has enormous contacts, enormous expertise, and he's really interesting. Long-time fan, first time actually meeting him. And ditto, there's been a few people that I've met at MWC for the first time where we were like, oh, we know of each other, but I didn't actually know that you existed. There was literally a PR at NTT, which is a Japanese tech firm, who said that they were very glad to see me because then they were convinced that I was actually real rather than just some sort of hallucination. I don't know whether they meant that I was just AI or whether they meant that I was three people in a trench coat.
I would love you to be an AI. That would be, given that we had coffee last week.
AI.
Only as an AI, okay. Would you like some other insufferable news?
No, not really, because you just insulted me. No, go on. Yeah.
We are just outside the top 100 in the UK. So if this is a great note that if you are listening, which you are, or watching, which you are, then do share us, leave comments, leave reviews, tell your friends about us if you do enjoy it. We tend to do that at the bottom of the show, but then by that point, everyone's already tired because we've already spoken for too long. But if you are enjoying us, if you like what we do, then do share us and tell everyone about us, because we can only make it into a thing that makes any sense by getting enough audiences. So we appreciate you, and hopefully we can break into the top 100 and go from there. That bit of marketing and self-promotion made me feel a little bit sick. That made me feel weird. We should probably move on to our main story. When I read Hanna Horvath's Substack about the tierification of everything, it made me aware of something that now kicks me in the face at least once a day, but I hadn't quite been able to put my finger on it until then exactly what it's called, that everything is an upsell and everything has been tierified. Tierification refers to the pervasive adoption of tiered pricing and service models across industries, from streaming to airlines to everyday goods to even at buying Adidas stuff, which I found out the other day, and experiences like music festivals, sports events, coffee shops, theme parks, and even fast food restaurants where consumers pay more for better experiences, which used to just be experiences. So the simplest example is the airport, where you can board in sometimes one of 9 different queues for economy, premium economy, and a long list of made-up brand names, for extra leg rooms and 1 free glass of Prosecco, until you get to actually ye olde first class. Maybe you're allowed baggage? Maybe you've paid £50 extra to have a bag that's 10 centimetres bigger. Maybe you haven't. But that doesn't even get us on to the airport lounges, which I'm sure we will talk about in great detail in a minute. So there's a New Yorker piece from last December that sums things up really well. So the thing about lounging is it's impossible to lounge without worrying that somebody somewhere is lounging better. Zach Helfand writes, it's the New Yorker being at its most New Yorker, and I'm obsessed with this. Hanna Horvath is a financial psychology expert, a journalist, a copywriter, an agency founder, and the author of Your Brain on Money Substack. She's broken down the tierification of everything into why companies do this, not just in the air industry, but how luxury, if luxury is even the right word, is stratified. So Hanna, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. So I'm obsessed with the many examples of this and just the depth that you go to with the sort of economic reasoning behind it, and you properly laid it out and where the endpoint might be. And so you sort of say that the airport lounge wars is the perfect metaphor for what's happening with the entire economy. So I'm really interested to find out exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah. So a lot of my work is rooted in kind of how these broader cultural and economic forces like shape how we see the world. And so, tierification specifically is a very unifying consumer experience that we're all in. And it's a byproduct of our economic system, of like late stage capitalism, how a lot of things have become financialized. And it's rooted in both the products we're currently using and, like I said before, kind of the broader economic forces that are happening around us. Obviously, this kind of stuff has been happening for a while now. I'm not going to pretend like there hasn't been tiers over the past couple of decades, but I think what is happening now is how visible and constant and specifically algorithmically optimized all of this has become. It's gone from just the products you're using to the services we're using, and then also now the experiences that we're having. And it's fairly inescapable, I would argue, in daily life. And again, I think it's rooted in kind of the current, economic world we're in. And I think it explains a lot of people's general dissatisfaction with their own finances and with the broader economy. And I think that informs a lot of consumer behavior today.
So it reminded me of this Telegraph piece that I was absolutely sure was written last year, but actually turns out it was from 2022 when I was looking up for this, and it was saying that the middle classes have ruined airport lounges. So in the piece, travel blogger Gilbert Ott told the Telegraph, what used to be an a la carte became a buffet, then the buffet went from properly cooked pasta to 3-day-old baguettes and pre-packaged yogurts. They're not even trying to create a premium experience anymore. What happened to the nice things? Why aren't we allowed nice things anymore?
The airport lounge is a great example because really what it is a marketing tool for the airlines and the credit cards. I don't know if many people realize that most airlines at this point are flying banks. I mean, the main way they make most of their money is through their credit card products, and less so through actually selling tickets. So the lounge winds up for them being this thing of like, look how amazing it is when you buy our credit cards and then get access to these lounges. They start off as this exclusive thing in order to kind of get people in the door, because perceived scarcity is often a huge marketing driver. I mean, aspiration is like the engine of consumer culture. And so eventually, though, enough people are going to be able to access it that it degrades the overall experience, as you just point out in the Telegraph article. So then what typically will then happen is this tiering, where what, an airline or another company or service will do is they'll degrade this like base tier and then kind of offer these increasingly more expensive and more luxury experiences. And so what happens is, the base tier, and human beings psychologically, once we get access to something, we get used to it. It becomes our normal. And so getting access to the lounge, it's hard to go back to not having lounge access because you're like, I'm so used to having free food and, a place to, free drinks and a place to kind of charge my computer. And then again, because then when that becomes not as fun for people, then they start thinking, well, for only a couple extra $100 a year, maybe I can access this more premium thing, and so on and so forth.
And you talk about that as a sort of the K-shaped economy, which I'm not an economist. I'm not that familiar with that sort of thinking, and our sort of nerdier tech-focused types of audience will probably not be either. So, what's the sort of K-shaped economy, and how does that fit in here?
Yeah, so the K-shaped economy is a term to kind of describe what's been happening in consumer behavior and also a way to kind of explain the rapid increased wealth inequality post-pandemic. And so if you think about the letter K, you obviously have one fork going up, one fourth going down. And so the K-shaped economy kind of describes a economic, environment where the top X percent of, the top income earners, the richest people are doing quite well. And then the bottom, majority is in this slow decline. And that is pretty sums up kind of the current environment that we're in. There's plenty of data to back this up. I mean, the top 10%, 20% of, consumers, they drive almost half of consumer spending in the United States. If you're an asset holder, you're probably in that top 10, 20%. Maybe you own a home, maybe you own stocks. By and large, I mean, we've had some volatility in the market in the past week, but by and large, you're doing quite well. Home prices have gone up.
Just a little bit of volatility.
Home prices in the past 5 years have gone up significantly. The stock market has also more or less gone up significantly over the past couple of years. But if you are primarily a wage earner and you don't own assets, there's a good chance that your wages have not kept up with inflation. Maybe you've lost your job, you're struggling to find a new job. And so, again, it kind of shows how one group of people, a minority really, is really improving or doing quite well in this current economy. And then kind of the majority, it feels is kind of slow slide down. And that explains people's perception of the economy. Because if you perceive the economy one way, that becomes a lot of your reality. And I think that explains why, some people feel like the economy is doing just fine. Thank you very much. While, the majority, if you talk to kind of the quote unquote average American, they probably don't feel that great about their financial situation. I think they feel very, frustrated and, upset with the way that things are going. And this maps onto tierification because if you think about it, we're in a capitalistic society. Companies are going to innovate or design their products for the people that have the money. So if the top 10, 20% of consumers are driving the majority of consumer spending, what types of products are companies going to design? They're going to design increasingly luxury experiences, luxury products that target the demographic because that is where the money is. And I think you see that a lot in how the tierification has happened and how, you can see this also with the rise of like these very luxury, like members only clubs. I call this the access economy. Other types of like airport lounges is a good example, but even kind of beyond that.
I think I sort of touched on this at the beginning that I lost my top tier Adidas consumer status, I think last year and I was really sad about this. For somehow I don't get one bad 20% discount once a year for not things that I don't need nor want. And I was like, why do I need this? What am I doing with this? Why does this matter? Why is this why have I gamified spending too much money at this store? And you talked about sort of that chasing your United status or silver status. And it feels like, is it gamification? Is it just capitalism? Is it algorithmic based perfect pricing as you talk about in your article? Or is it all of the above and we are just pawns in this late stage capitalist rigmarole?
Oh my gosh, I think it's kind of all of the above. I mean, with status specifically, as I talked about in my newsletter, as human beings, we want status. We want to fit in and we want to, a lot of the way that we spend our money is like self-identity reinforcing. And so status symbols is a great way for people to use their money to communicate to other people the type of person they want to be perceived as. So a lot of companies that's why there's loyalty programs. That's why there's kind of, airline status. It's built around this idea of, exclusivity and being part of this club that other people can't be part of. Your experience and my experience, kind of once you get in there, you're like, okay, what was the point of all this, And to be fair, I think a lot of that, there might have been a time where, United Silver was this amazing deal, but I do think now there's so many tiers that, I can't compete with like a platinum member that's spending $75,000 a year on, United flights or on their United credit cards. And so I think, again, it goes to say like, just because the inequality has gotten so vast, that initial tier isn't even worth it anymore because there's always going to be those bigger spenders at the top that are driving a majority of the spending and also getting a majority of the perks, so to speak.
And is it the case then, Hannah, that for everybody but the top of the top, things have gotten worse? Like, is the tierification of society always built into being a degradation of service, or actually are there some people for whom the tierification is a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think tierification is great if you can afford it. That this maps onto the term enshittification. By Cory Doctorow, and it describes how, platforms will kind of degrade their core product to extract more value. This is the same kind of principle, just mapped onto services and, experiences. And kind of the psychological trick with a lot of this is they'll have the base, tier, and then they'll have that mid tier that's maybe just a little bit more. And so then it's this idea of marginal luxury where it's like, well, if I just pay a little bit more, maybe I'll get this like much better experience. And that's the trick. They're not really selling the base tier. They're trying to get you into that middle to at least make you feel like you're part of that luxury group, even though you're not even touching kind of what the real exclusive premium, product is.
There was just one episode just before Christmas where I said the word tierification 4 times, and listeners got in touch and be like, why are you saying this word so much? I was like, oh, fine, I just read all about it. I was really excited about it. I thought it was being innovative. And everyone was like, yeah, this has been a thing for a while. Cory Doctorow has been around for ages. Please stop mentioning it. We know what it is. I'm very sorry, listeners. I apologize. But I'm still obsessed with that idea, and that's why tierification matters so much. Sorry, Chris, I interrupted.
No, not at all. It's true. I mean, we need to talk about it, and we need to use that word because, frankly, it's resembling.
It pays for Cory Doctorow's expensive lifestyle.
Well, quite exactly. His tierification is probably pretty good, I would imagine. I mean, is there? You mentioned the idea that actually platforms are doing this, and when you were talking, Hannah, I kind of immediately came to mind of like Elon Musk's changing of X since he took it over, and I wondered whether there's something kind of not noble, but at least worth respecting in the fact that he just literally made it pay for play. The changing of that kind of stratification of individuals into respected voices that we used to have on Twitter, being you were allied to a news organization or you were a politician or someone within power. Now it's just the kind of, if you want to pay, then you get premium. Is that in some way kind of emblematic of where we're going? Is this at least to be respected because it's just transparent?
I mean, respected, I don't know, but it is kind of the reality of the situation. I mean, that this does map onto another major theme that I write about, which is, so much of our current economic system is built around gambling and grifting and scamming. And I think like online behavior on social media platforms is very emblematic of that because the algorithms reward sensationalism and aspiration, yes, but like sensationalism, and Twitter or X especially rewards anger. So that's why you get a lot of rage baiting, on these platforms. A lot of people will it invites people to post things that are just incorrect or, not factual in order to just get, engagement and get interactions so they can get money. So, obviously, I think that leads to just a huge amount of perverse incentives, but it's just an example of what is happening kind of across a lot of facets of our economy where people feel like the only way to really make money in this economy or get an edge is to scam or grift or, engage with this type of content online because they're like, I'm working. And again, it feeds into the K-shaped economy. Like I'm working a 9 to 5. I can't afford groceries. I'm struggling. I'm going online. I'm seeing somebody posting like rage bait online. They're claiming to make, we don't even really know, but they're claiming to make thousands of dollars a month. Why don't I just do that?
I think the most wholesome grift as part of that was a person who owned a storage container, but turned it to make it look like the inside of a private airline. And so all of these influencers could go up and they could pretend like they're in a private jet, and they were booked out for like months and months and months and months and months, but they were making an honest living as much as owning a fake pirate airline could be, and just renting it out for days and days and days for thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. And so it's like, that's probably bad. That's probably abusive or bad in some way, but also respect the angle, respect the grift. I think that's the sort of thing where that's where now we've got to this in sort of social marketing and where we are in the world of people just standing near really expensive cars to pretend like they own them.
Oh, 100%. And I think too, like, I think what happens when you cannot access quote unquote real wealth, right? Because again, we're in this environment where like the top 1% is going to be almost impossible for the average person to ever reach that. So you'll take a step back and you'll reach towards these more visible status symbols to at least attempt to communicate that you have wealth. And then of course online, like you just said, it's unbelievably easy to fake that you're rich. I mean, anybody can lie online about how much money they have. And so, what happens then, regardless of if it's real or not, it becomes normalized in your brain. I mean, if you're media consumption, you're seeing every day people posting like them owning all this stuff and traveling all these places. Even if you can reason that it might not be real, over time your brain starts to normalize it, and then you start to think, well, if all these other people can do it, why can't I?
And so that brings us actually round in a neat circle to the airline lounge. So there's that fortune story, which I think you linked to in your piece, sort of talking about the declining pleasure of the airport lounge. And the writer Nick Lichtenberg writes, sort of, it's a metaphor for the declining prospects of the upper middle class in an age of elite overproduction, which argues that certain societies grow so rich and successful that they produce too many people of premium education for the number of premium jobs or premium experiences that the economy can actually support. So it's this sort of, you were promised all of these, and then we get into the sort of late stage capitalism, then we get into the sort of this generation not doing as well as the last generation, and all of this what comes next question. So is that a good sort of summary of the idea of the elite overproduction that you were talking about?
Yeah. So what a lot of people might not realize is wealth is completely relative. There's no singular definition of rich. I mean, maybe we can all agree that a trillionaire is rich, but really how you're defining.
I could argue a billionaire is probably rich as well.
I know. I was just reading an article this morning about like the first trillionaire is on its way, which is just fantastic for all of us. But
who's
anyway,
it going to be?
I think it might be Elon. I mean,
oh no,
fingers crossed, no, but that's the direction we're at it. I think we can all agree billionaire is also rich. But beyond that, like, we use the environment around us and context clues in the environment around us, our friends and peers and et cetera, to help us determine what rich is. I mean, if you're a millionaire hanging out with billionaires, you're not going to feel wealthy, most likely. But if you're a millionaire hanging out with people making $100,000, you might feel wealthier in comparison. So a lot of it is just comparing yourself to other people. And so the upper middle class specifically, a lot of the way that they see themselves and see their wealth is very relative. And so that class specifically is often a class that feels like their expectation is built around mobility, right? Like they should be moving solidly into the upper class. And so I think a lot of the experiences and products that are like rooted in being upper class, is a lot of upper middle class people reach towards it. The airport lounge is a good example of that. And so, I don't know necessarily if it's an overproduction, but I do think that is a shifting amount of expectation of what it means to have a good life. And I do think for that cohort specifically, the concept of like keeping up with the Joneses and really high amounts of status spending is associated with that group. Because again, when you're at this point of like just there, but not quite, you still want to spend like you are there. Because I think for a lot of people in that group, it's a lot about how you're using your money to communicate to other people where you're at. And there's that pressure of like, I have to send my kids to the right school. I have to go on the right vacation. I have to be like making sure I'm, spending all these things to post about it, et cetera. So, and like I said before, I do think it is a little bit about the products that, are being designed where you make something a little bit accessible. Then everybody kind of hops onto the bandwagon. And then you're like, whoa, there's too many people. Now we're going to design all these like crazy other exclusive experiences, and like it's a treadmill. You can't get off of it, and there's always going to be another thing. There's always going to be another tier. There's always going to be another kind of group of people to impress.
As we've said, and Alex pointed out, like you can fake it even if you never will make it. But do you ever foresee a backlash where actually people start to prioritize other things in terms of their status relative to one another? Is it that actually, when everybody has access to generative AI models on the relative cheap, or they can pretend to have like a Gucci bag or whatever, that it's the human connection and it's I don't know, cable knits or something like that makes you feel better or superior to someone else?
Yeah, I think there's two things happening. And actually, it's when you brought up the Gucci bag, I think it's a great example where, now you can buy a fake Gucci bag that looks identical to a Gucci bag. So those types of status symbols have become a lot less of a status symbol just simply because of how easy it is to, fake that you kind of have those things. I wrote about this in a recent newsletter about like what the status symbols of, 2026 are going to be. And I think they're built a lot around access and privacy, like the ability to, not be online, the ability to be in your compound in Hawaii and, not having to like interact with anybody. I think a lot about this like Wall Street Journal article. I think it came out at the end of last year about like how a lot of billionaires are buying up private islands. And it's like this desire for complete privacy, being off the grid. I think those things are going to be like the true wealth status symbols. And I think status symbols have always been built around like time and not having to do the things you kind of want to do. So I do think it's going to shift. It's shifting a little bit away from like actual items and more into like the rooms you can get into, and the spaces you can be in. But the other thing you said is, as I do think, and this is something I, champion all the time, is how do we opt out of this consumer culture that, again, is like heavily reliant on you being in a place of lack? Like if you were content with your life and the stuff you had, a lot of, consumer culture is built on this idea of like, you need more. And so I do think like, if you think about like the de-influencing movement, minimalism movement a little bit, and or just like anti-consumerism, is like, how do we find a way to build a life where you can feel like you have enough? And I will say it is hard for myself, especially when, I'll seek out like, and this feeds into enshittification and the tierification of things, of like the general quality of a lot of things has declined over time. And you gave the example of clothing. It's very difficult now to find modern clothing that doesn't have polyester in it, that doesn't have plastic in it. The same with furniture. It's actually quite difficult to find like a true wood piece of furniture that's like 100% wood, and that's like not like a blend of wood pulp and stuff like that. So I think it's just like hard to live, a life that's like kind of outside of consumer culture, just because of how embedded it is and how difficult it is to kind of find high quality things that aren't, a bajillion dollars.
Is that a US thing, or is that a sort of UK thing? Because it feels like the US has a particular relationship with trading standards.
That's a very polite way of putting it.
Well, then now we've left the EU, I suppose, we're probably at risk of all of those sort of grey areas of what is and isn't fine.
Yeah, I mean, the US is kind of free for all with that. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, being an ethical consumer is extraordinarily difficult, and it's actually a privilege to be an ethical consumer, just because of how, embedded so much of this like low quality but low cost stuff there is in our market.
Then I'm going to finish this section off with it. There was a bit of a New Yorker story that just made me so like cheer for everybody involved. So in 2016, at a Singapore airport, a Malaysian businessman named Rajali Buntut missed a flight to Kuala Lumpur. He dozed off in the Plaza Premium Lounge. Instead of rebooking, he went to more lounges, hopping from one to the next, a total of 31 times. He didn't leave the airport for 18 days. He got into the lounges with a priority pass, a perk of his Citi credit card, and forged flight tickets. A staffer at one lounge eventually alerted the authorities, and she received a special ceremony and a plaque. Buntut received a fraud conviction and was sent to jail, which I think, if you're going to respect the hustle, I think that's just rude. I think that should be applauded and loved and cherished and celebrated, as the New Yorker did, rather than it being punished by a jail sentence.
Yeah, I am impressed with the hustle. I do understand why the companies were probably so pissed, because that there's a reason why it's like you can't get into a lounge like until it's like 2 or 3 hours before your flight time. Like, they don't want you to enjoy the free stuff too much. There's a limit to the free perks you get. But yeah, jail time sounds crazy. I just would assume they would like take away his membership and like ban him from not ever having a membership again. But
how did he also forge his tickets? Like,
yeah.
That's the bit that ended up in jail.
Yeah, but even then, like,
sense.
How do you do that in a lounge? I mean, this was 2016, so you didn't necessarily have digital tickets all the time.
I know,
you'd have to get a printer.
I feel like they run a pretty tight ship. I'm more just thinking about like how he was sleeping, and also like not having fresh air for 18 days. I don't know if I could do that.
You do it for like 24 hours or just slightly more, I think then it becomes like a bit like, how long can I stay here? I feel like there are so many YouTube videos of how long can we stay in this airport. There are so many TikTok bits of like, how long can we do this for? One of my first articles was spending 25 hours on the 25 bus in London because we thought it would be really funny. It wasn't. It was weird and horrible and scary, but ultimately made for hilarious journalism. But some weird stuff happened. I don't know. And in retrospect, why would you ever do that? But that's not 18 days also.
18 days is a lot. I personally would not spend 18 days in a lounge. But again, I have Priority Pass. It's probably the most accessible lounge membership that you can get. And, the lounges, especially in the past year, have been very full. And I would say the overall lounge experience in a lot of these priority pass lounges are not super good. And so I think that's a great example of tierification, where it's the more accessible lounge has gone pretty bad, and it's kind of pushing everybody into these more elite lounges. And at least in America, the more elite lounges have gotten a lot stricter. A couple years ago, if you had an American Express card, and I think any Delta card, don't quote me on that, but you could get into a Delta lounge. And now it's no, you need to have these very specific premium Delta cards. You can't even have an American Express card. So again, I think it's an example of let's clamp down on the more exclusive experiences. And then, this other kind of free-for-all one, we'll just kind of leave it where it is, which isn't that great.
Is there an end game to this? Because I know you're using this as a metaphor for the whole economy. So, as much as you can predict the future of the whole economy, really easy question. What, this sort of late stage capitalism, the end game for airport lounges and how that relates to the end game of this quasi late stage capitalism, or what is the snapback if there is to be one?
Yeah. I mean, we have an economy built on incentives. And so there's currently no incentive to design products or experiences. I'm speaking a little generally, but to design products and experiences for the majority of people, and that's why there's increasingly experiences designed for the people that have the money. And so I think this will lead to the continued stratification of experiences and products, but also of wealth. Our economy also is shifting away from labor and more into capital. And so what happens when you don't even need the labor of the majority of America, or the bottom 40% of America? I mean, what happens then? And I think, it's another, it very much maps onto, the income and net worth of people in America, and also kind of the policies and products that we interact with. And again, this kind of behavior has existed for a while. I'm not arguing that there hasn't been a premium tier before, but again, it's just how embedded it is in almost every experience we have now, and just how visible it is.
You got half a plug in there, but now is the time. You give your full plug. And where can our audience find you?
Yes. So I write a newsletter called Your Brain on Money, which is about how, our economy and our culture shapes how we think about money and ourselves. You can find me on any social media platform as well, also at Your Brain on Money.
And you have multiple TikTok accounts. Is that sort of a spread the feed account, or are there many people impersonating, or what's going on?
There are many people impersonating me, which, I don't know many, but there have been. And, it's you'll report something will happen. Sometimes nothing will happen. It's there's only so much I can do. But if you're getting a DM from me telling you to invest in crypto, don't do that.
I thought you were next stage algorithm gaming with all the multiple accounts with different spellings.
Yeah, it's actually my office is just 20 phones that are just all engagement farming. No, I mean, I guess it's nice they're spreading the good word, but I'm
sorry. I thought it was some next level social theory.
No.
Then report.
I don't have time. I mean, I commend people that have time to do that, but oh my God, I do not.
Well, Hannah, thank you so much for your time, and it was an absolute pleasure.
Yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back. The annual World Mobile Congress, or MWC, in Barcelona, Spain, is coming to a close as you listen to this. It's a staging ground for a lot of what's coming to the mobile industry and the sort of the tech that tends to run around a couple of years ahead of its true consumer market. So when Chris and I started Crash, we absolutely promised that we would not be a consumer tech podcast, because there are nearly infinite unboxing YouTube channels saying really long strings of numbers about the exact specification of a thing. So what's the point? But Chris is in Barcelona. Apple and Samsung have both timed their 2026 announcements around MWC, and it gives us an excuse to talk about emerging tech. So the big announcements, and Chris will probably give you a less jaded, more detailed version because he's actually there, or maybe a more jaded one, not sure yet, but it's generally an ultra camera phone, a robot phone, a lot of other devices that used to not fold, but now some of them do fold, and lots of humanoid robots. So many humanoid robots. But one actually potentially big announcement was from Qualcomm of just how close 6G connectivity might be, but we'll probably get into that in a bit. At the Samsung event, the big story was that new devices will really lean into agentic AI, even though agentic AI doesn't work yet. Chris, before we get into MWC full scale, you've actually been fascinated, and we need to be careful here about how many long words we use, about the implications of AI, of what Apple's M5 Max announcement might be, and how it's this sort of AI processing battle between it and NVIDIA's DGX Sparks. And I'm scared we're sounding like one of those podcasts that talks about things like DGX Sparks. But what am I talking about? Because I don't really know.
It's okay. We're not going to go into the detail of it, and we're not going to spend long on it. So stick with us. But I do think that this is actually significant, and it's significant because effectively what it does is it allows you to spin up your own LLM, your own AI system tailored to yourself, not needing to have an internet connection, not needing to go and pay money to an OpenAI, an Anthropic or whatever, and to do so on consumer hardware. So that DJX Spark that you mentioned, first off, this is the kind of very high-powered, industrial-scale, hugely expensive, effectively computer servers that you could buy. Now, NVIDIA's version of this was a consumer-facing product. So you could spend several £1,000s buying something that a year ago would have allowed you to run an AI model. What we're seeing with Apple, with their latest devices powered by this new chip, is effectively that coming much closer to the general consumer. And that, I think, is significant because that's setting us up for what is coming in the future, which is that even if you don't have like the coding ability, you could, in theory, be using AI much more logically because you're not having to go through a provider. And so like that to me is just an exciting time because I could run an LLM personally. I've been trying to run an LLM on this laptop that I just bought, and it's kind of semi-successful, but I wish in hindsight it was a little bit more powerful. Apple has given me that, and where Apple goes, everybody else follows.
And so, idiot, speak it for me. If I buy this fancy new laptop when it comes out, I think it's scheduled for, well, maybe it comes out later in the year. If I buy this new $3,500 laptop, I will be able to build my own LLM that can challenge OpenAI? Or what is the end user case?
All that you need to know is there have been two really significant moments that I think we can kind of smush together. Number one is the Apple release. So the hardware that can run AI models is becoming closer to the general consumer and also at a price point that, while still obscenely expensive, it is not significantly more expensive than you might hope it would be. At the same time, literally this week as well, we have seen the release of new models under the Qwen family, QWEN, which is developed by Alibaba, Chinese company. And often what happens is these Chinese firms end up effectively doing kind of lookalike versions of high-level AI models. So the Claudes, the OpenAIs of the world, their models get sort of replicated and then released under these open weight alternatives that are offered for free. Now, there's another wrinkle in this, which we're not going to get into because otherwise this podcast will last 90 minutes or more, which is that actually this Qwen release, Qwen 3.5, looks like it might be the last one by Alibaba because a whole load of people, literally like 2 days after they release these models, have said they're leaving the company. And that, I think, is some sort of weird power struggle going on there, which I don't think we have the time.
No, let's get into that. That sounds like if it's going to be the sort of really confusing bit of what Alibaba does, that's a huge story, surely.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So this is happening just literally almost as we're recording this, a few hours beforehand. A bunch of these people who were intimately involved in the development of these Qwen models, the Qwen 3.5 is probably the equivalent of Sonnet 4.5 or 4.6, which is like the latest version of Anthropic. You're smiling now, Alex. Why are you smiling?
There are just a lot of numbers with decimal points in it, rather than say why the hell people are leaving Alibaba.
Yeah. Okay. So that's just been released, right? Then what's happened is a bunch of people are leaving Alibaba. Now we don't know fully why. Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. It seems like, and this is the reason why I'm a little bit worried about the idea of these open weight free models being released from under the Qwen family, at least for the time being in the future, is because Alibaba have hired a bunch of people who were involved in Google Gemini. And the thinking is, at the minute, amongst those who are in the know, far smarter than I am, is that effectively Alibaba has brought them in and is going to try and go down a more commercial approach. Because ultimately, why would you spend as a multi-billion-dollar traded company in China time, effort, money, employee workload developing these things and then releasing them for free?
But it doesn't mean that Alibaba is hemorrhaging staff. It just means that they're taking a different direction.
Yeah, it means that they're basically pivoting to say, we want to make money out of this, I think. And so there is a fundamental disagreement between those who are doing it for the love of the game, as it were, and those who are saying, well, actually, we need to make this pay in the long run. And this is fundamentally a challenge that we're going to have with AI generally, which is we're all subsidized by these AI companies at the minute. Like, if you are a power user of AI, you could potentially be going through thousands of dollars worth of tokens, which aren't exactly equivalent to words, but they're kind of similar-ish in a way that, for the purpose of this podcast, will be absolutely fine for comprehension. We're using thousands potentially of those sorts of things at the same time as you might pay $20 a month or whatever for access to the model.
So we should probably actually move on to what the hell you're doing at Mobile World Congress, being that we started off as the intro that we're going to talk about MWC here, and then we haven't really done any of that. And to draw back the curtain a little bit, whenever you're covering a conference like this, it is always, you do the first bit, which is dead serious news and the big tech news. Second, you do the niche things for the real nerds, and then no one reads those, no one looks at those at all. Then there's something about something stupid happening, someone breaking an unbreakable phone, someone punching a robot, whatever that is, and that's where all of the volume traffic comes from. So we're going to do this in 3 parts. Well, the big tech releases, if there are any, and you can say, like, I was kind of glib at the start by saying it's just a foldable phone and a phone with a camera in it that's slightly better than previously, but I'm not there. I read 3 articles about it. I didn't spend too much time with it.
No, but it's true. There's not really anything interesting. I've been talking to people. This is my first MWC. Other people have been here much longer and much more often than I have. And they all say it's been a bit of a weird year. In part, that is because not all of the people who we imagined would be there are there. Basically, anybody from the Middle East has not been able to get there because airspace closed due to the Iran situation. And the floor of the conference, while busy for me, I'm being told by other people, has been comparatively quiet in relation to previous years. But the people I've been talking to, they say, products-wise, this hasn't been a classic MWC. Instead, the focus has been on, as you talked about, the idea of 6G, the release by Qualcomm of a new chip, which is much smaller and able to run AI models within wearables, which I think is quite a significant thing. And combined, those two are, I think, pointing towards the future direction of travel, which is small chips that are embedded in wearables that use AI, that require 6G because they're going to have high volumes of data going through them, and they need to be whip smart quick in terms of being able to actually respond to your queries in real time.
So just a quick note on Iran. We have made the editorial choice not to really dwell upon it, partly because it's such a quickly moving situation, partly because it's such a difficult thing to get accurate reporting on. At some point, I'm sure we will try and cover it in some way. But if anyone is going to drop in a comment and say, why aren't you talking about Iran? It is a choice. It is a choice not to do so because there are people much better and more experienced and more well-read in that situation than we are. And we will come to it as and when it becomes relevant to the sort of technology or technology adjacent audiences. That was a serious bit. It meant to be a funny bit. Right. No, hold on. We're going to talk about, I think so 6G is, given that 5G is still shit everywhere but London, and even in bits of London, I always wanted to write that piece around the dead spots of London, and no one would commission me. So if anyone wants to commission me, I would still love to write why there are still dead spots of reception in London. How far is 6G away? Was there a time frame on it, or was it just more it's closer than it ever was before? Sort of confusing press release. It doesn't say anything.
Yeah, it was a confusing press release. That doesn't say anything. There was agreement amongst mobile carriers to say that we're going to do this with infrastructure providers. Ironically, so the MWC is organised by the GSMA, which is kind of the industry association for mobile carriers, connectivity, industry experts and things like that. The Wi-Fi, I can say, has been unequivocally shit across the whole venue. And that is the one thing that you would hope that they would be able to do. It's been atrocious, except for in the press room, they call it a press village. It's not a press village. It has some biscuits and some water, which is nice enough, but like it's not a village.
You said you would not go in there, so something must have gone horribly wrong.
Well, it's because it's the only place that has reliable Wi-Fi. And it's also quite quiet in comparison. One of the things that is surprising to me about MWC is quite how loud and brash and just in your face everything is, which I suppose makes sense, right? Because you have thousands of stalls spread across a massive sort of campus. You have, hundreds, more than 100,000, I think, attendees coming across and talking and to various people. You have to find a way to draw people in. Best booth that I've seen so far is a company that basically made their booth in a castle, a fairy tale castle, which looked really interesting and made me stop and take a picture. Did not make me stop and walk in. Just took a picture and then moved on, and that was it.
But what do you know what they were doing or what they were advertising or what their bit was?
I can look at the photo that I took.
And see, if you don't remember what they did, then it's effective for reach, but not for conversion. All the different cohort analyses around audiences.
One thing that was interesting though was also, I think, and it's worth highlighting this, and it's something that I've written about for Nikkei Digital Governance because it struck me, was when you come to MWC, when you come to a conference like this, you realize quite how central China is to our world of tech. They are absolutely everywhere in this conference. As soon as you walk in, you almost effectively have to walk through a massive Huawei stand. And when I say massive, I mean it takes up almost all of one entire hall. And there are 8 halls in MWC. It is huge, and it has like airport style security scanners where you put your passport in and you have to go through like a gate in order to get into another aspect of it. I took a walk behind the booth itself. I mean, calling it a booth seems like ridiculous because it's like a mini city effectively, and it literally is a mini city because there are just row on row on row of kind of like behind the scenes rooms where, I kid you not, I looked at kind of like their media coordination room. So that's not their press room. It's where the press officers are, I guess, arranging the talks and the interviews that are going to happen. There were 30 people in that room, just on tables, row after row of them, which was remarkable to me. They brought in their own snacks. They've done all of this sort of stuff. They have like effectively not quite a kitchen, but a staging area, a pantry for this, which is the size of some people's booths. And it shows, I think, in stark relief how reliant we are on China, which is what I find so interesting about some of the strong talk that goes on with the United States, with the UK, with the European Union about reducing reliance on other countries. When you come here and you see just how big their presence is, you realize quite how important they are to our world.
I mean, that's a whole episode that we should do about the sort of the Huaweiification of everything and the un-Huaweiification of everything, particularly domestically and in European terms, and the sort of the Trump wave of Huawei that goes up and down, and then it's been out the news for a few years now. But you sort of covered the serious bits, and then you posted a video of 2 robots trying to punch each other or punch a guy in the ring or something that no one engaged with, but everyone watched.
Yeah, it's just one of those gimmicks. You were right to say that humanoids were everywhere here. So there was different grades of humanoids. There was just someone who's bought like a $10,000 mini 4-foot tall humanoid at an entry level and put a T-shirt on it, was branded to their company, and nobody paid attention to that. There were humanoids that were doing stuff. So there was a humanoid that was making dim sum, get the thing to do funny things, and then great. For those who are listening only, Alex has just kind of died inside a little bit.
The humanoid form is not efficient at producing dim sum. Why would you humanoid the dim sum creation?
Because it makes people stop at your booth, and it is as effective. Either the two track approach to having a booth at MWC, as far as I can tell, is you either stick a humanoid there doing something stupid so that you pay attention to it and get people in, or you have a spin the wheel type thing at the front of your booth that offers prizes, and you get people doing that.
I think the way that you refer to humanoid now just makes me think it's a person who's a little bit robotic rather than a robot that's a little bit human. And so...
No, that was the Hong Kong booth where they have local people who are obviously just bored out of their mind, standing at the very edge of the booth, waiting to answer any questions that you have, but actually just looking like robots because they're in like weird flight attendant style outfits as well. Like they're very formal for a tech industry conflab.
Then final question on this. I think MWC has a reputation for being 5 years ahead. So all of the sort of 5G stuff and all the rollout of 5G technology was stuff that MWC really pushed sort of 2014 before it really became more prominent 2019. If there's one technology that is going to be absolutely everywhere in 5 years that you saw this year, what would that one thing be?
You're going to hate it because you say that's not a thing, but agentic AI.
It's not a thing yet.
It's a thing in 5 years. It's a thing. Actually, you know what? It's not a thing in 5 years. It's a thing in 2 years. It's not a thing that everybody will use. I had an interesting conversation with, and I can't say who it was, but I had an interesting conversation about how the reality matches the hype of AI. Agentic AI will be a thing, I think, in a few years, couple of years. When we say a thing, we don't mean everybody will be using it. Like, not everybody is going to want to use agentic AI. However, I think that a kind of critical mass of individuals will start to use it because they will see utility in the power of it. And that, I think, is, so we need to kind of refigure our definition of a thing here.
Then does that change the whole, because I think the thing about 5G and it coming out 5 years, it took 5 years to build the infrastructure, but the core concepts and the core science and the core technology and the core analytics of it was really, really crystal clear. Everyone understood what it was. Everyone understood what it would do. Everyone understood the bandwidth that it would take. And it was just a matter of time of building out that infrastructure. Agentic AI is this sort of clusterfuck of things that people would like it to do. Unless I haven't done the reading over the last 36 hours that somehow everything new has changed. Everyone understands where it needs to get to, but the frameworks in which it gets there and the mechanics and the science of how it does it are much blurrier than they should be for something that is a dead cert to become true.
Well, I think it's not that there's a dead cert, but I think that there's many horses in the race, right? And there are different approaches to it. And so it's kind of like, to use a historical analogy, it's kind of like the Betamax versus VHS battle, or the Blu-ray versus HD DVD. Is that right? HD DVD, yeah. Too many letters on this. That
was just won by real crisp economies of scale and a more effective that was essentially an open source battle. So any proprietary system failed, any open source system worked. And it wasn't necessarily that there were many horses in the race. It was more just whomever invested the most quickly to own the medium were the person who went, and the person who were willing to forego owning the literal item while still owning the means of production, all those things. That's much more complicated. I'm too far down the rabbit hole with that. I spent too long researching it. I don't think it is the same, is it? There are many people, and each of whom will try and hold its proprietary. If they do crack it, will own it in a proprietary way and engage in late stage capitalism to monetize the fuck out of it.
Well, this brings me back to where we started on this, which is massive, amazing, powerful AI chips on consumer hardware, plus locally run LLMs that are of a scale that matches those closed models, equals the future. That's why I'm so excited.
And our ability to somehow close loops in both of our sections this time round far outweighs the amount of planning that's gone into this. So we'll take false credit for it, and we'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back to the final section of Crashed, which is the section to which, and the questions to which, there are no answer. Chris, mine is dead serious and really important. Do you want to go first, or shall I go first?
No, you go first.
If a robot punches you, but nobody is around to see it, has it broken Asimov's laws?
This was actually a legitimate response to my post about this video, which was, I think, interesting. It still has broken Asimov's laws, no? I mean, this is the danger that we have. I find it really concerning that we are training humanoid robots, even in a jokey way, to show off at MWC to fight, because that just feels like a bad vibe in total to me.
For anyone who doesn't know what Asimov's laws are, they come from a 1942 story runaround, and they've become since the de facto laws of robotics, even though EU is trying to change them and the white papers are trying to change them, but fundamentally the popular version of it is Asimov. So 1, a robot may not injure a human or allow a human to come to harm through inaction. 2, a robot must obey human orders unless they conflict with the first law. 3, a robot must protect its own existence provided this does not conflict with the first or second laws. Why are there robots fighting? There's all of these sort of videos I keep seeing of robots with swords and robots with and then you kick the robot and the robot sort of stumbles about a bit. And why are we beating up robots?
I don't know. It's just a bad situation all around. I saw also that this is not new. When I posted this video, someone shared a video of Roland Manthorpe, who was Sky News technology correspondent, used to be at Wired, is an overall good egg, who I was very surprised engaged in this, probably being cajoled on by his producer because it would make good telly, attacking a robot and kicking it down and then standing over it like it was like a pro wrestling match, sort of arms flexed and things like that. And I just thought, this is as far away. Roland has gone full telly, as far as I can tell. It's as far away from what I imagined that he would be like, in compromising his humane qualities in order to attack a robot.
So you're saying that he's sold out to go kill robots?
Yeah, I mean, better than robots killing us.
Found.
On that one, let me ask you the question that there is no answer to as well, which is, how on earth does 6G work, and why on earth is it a big deal? Because truthfully, I've spoken to a lot of experts at MWC who should know what it is and why it's important, and they've not really been able to give me a convincing case.
So on the how it works, I'm not even going to touch that because
very good.
I mean, it'll just be a different bandwidth and quicker. When it comes to why it's important, I think that is a number of different reasons, but the primary ones is agentic AI, all the core processing power, the cloud nature of hard drives and the cloud nature of processing becomes, so your devices become smaller and smaller and smaller, which means you need to farm out more of your processing to the cloud, and to do that you have to have super hyper quick internet speeds. Again, 5G doesn't work in most places, and I think when you start getting the projection without screens, or the use of without screens, and you're moving things smaller and smaller, and these prototypes that have never quite worked at being able to project onto air, so where there's a set distance so you can see a thing that is 2 or 3 meters away but doesn't actually have a screen, it just has this sort of stop filter that is mind-blowing tech that doesn't quite work yet. Again, that requires that internet connection. It means you own fewer things, it means you store fewer and fewer things, and more stuff lives on this cloud. And once we figure that out, that will be this huge potential for an unlock where we aren't carting around devices all the time, but we are inherently connected for all of its positives and negatives, and that's a whole different conversation.
You should go and work for the GSMA. You've made it more logical and coherent than I think they have ever been able to.
I mean,
crashed is and everything is popular as well.
You're on a conference floor, unless you're going way out of the bit where the conference is.
I'm going around Barcelona, as we've established. I'm not spending as much time on the conference floor as you expect.
Crashes and Everything Popular is Wrong production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. The title music is from Nuffer. Check them out on all the streamers. We're hosted by Acast, assisted by Riverside Studios, and we're published every Thursday morning. So get in touch, as we talked about at the top of the show, if you want to say how great we are, how terrible we are, or you want to chat about anything. We have you covered. We can talk about anything you want. Increasingly, we're sort of mentioning in the show about how much people hate us talking about enshittification of everything else, but we are really keen to engage with you on all topics for all reasons. You can find me at Alex Hudson on TikTok, Instagram, wherever you want. Follow Chris at Stokel. All of his links are there. If you want to support the podcast, go to crash.substack.com or search for Crash Podcast wherever the hell you want, and we'll be back next week.